I see Darnella Davidson in the room. My band director and buddy from Los Angeles. I don't know if you can hear me yet, Darnella, but I am sure glad to see you. Thanks for being here. And for those of you that are obviously in the room right now, please feel free to drop us a note in the chat. Tell us where you're from and anything else you'd like to know about yourself. After that wonderful closing session that we had from Tim and Steve and Nola and everybody, I'm just not sure how we followed that up. But we'll do our best. We've got some great people in the room. Those of you that were with us at the session earlier today for the Collegiate track, you'll notice we've got a new panel of people who are ready to tackle your questions. I figured I needed to do a session called Questions You're Afraid to Answer, because some of these get really challenging and, really pretty heavy. And but are those the kind of questions that we need to be asking? And I just checked the Google forum and didn't see any new responses from earlier today. Check it again right now. Looks like we're still where we were, so there's a chance we just might be able to make it through all of these questions. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that one. All right, so we got Manhattan, Kansas. We got Atlanta. Let's get in the chat window. Let us know where you're from. I live in Dallas. I was born in Mississippi, lived in North Carolina, Illinois, and Michigan, so I'm officially from nowhere. My claim to fame is I was born in the same town as Elvis. So where were you born, Erin?
I was born in Hanover, Pennsylvania, and then we moved to Georgia when I was 11, 12, somewhere in there, and I just moved to Scottsdale, Arizona 2 years ago.
You have a little bit of an accent, right?
I have a hodgepodge of a weird northeastern/southern.
Well, that means that wherever you go, people can identify with you because they hear a little hint of who they are. I never know. I don't know how I never picked up a southern accent living in Mississippi and North Carolina during my early years, but that's just the way it is. Myra, where are you from?
I am from Tuskegee, Alabama. I was born on the campus of Tuskegee University in the hospital that used to be right there on campus. Yeah. So
someone else who's higher on the food chain than I am, so considering I'm from Mississippi, we have to look up to everybody is the way that works. Jarrett, you're a northern boy, aren't you?
Yeah, I was born in central New Jersey and then relocated to Texas after that.
So did you come to Texas specifically to follow a job opportunity, or what? How did that work?
Sure. I was a member of the Crossmen when the Crossmen moved from Philadelphia to San Antonio and ended up going with the Corps and then staying down in Texas for a job that was there. And so my whole family is up there and I'm still living in San Antonio.
Wow. So do they consider you a Texan now, or a naturalized Texan, or what?
As close as it's going to come. Yeah. Naturalized Texan is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I identify with these days. So we have McRae, Georgia, Fayetteville, Gilbert, Arizona, Ellensburg, Washington. Excellent. Marietta, Georgia. Does that sound like home to you, Erin?
That's Rob Lowry, I bet.
Oh, yeah. I know, Robin. Awesome. Great to see you.
I'm sure that's Rob Lowry.
Man, I haven't seen you, Rob, in a long time. We had dinner together, a bunch of us, after I was out there for an honor band thing. That was so much fun. Excellent. Eric, that must be Eric Tinkler, my buddy from Kansas, who's got his phenomenal podcast called Not Your Forte, right? Great podcast, and I think he's gone video now. So, Eric, maybe you can post a link for us in the chat window so we can all check out what you're doing. It's great stuff. Really great stuff. Let's get a few more people telling us where you're from. Wonder if we have Darnella, where are you? I see you in the attendee window, but I haven't heard from you. Darnella is a wonderful band director in an urban setting, Los Angeles. Just does amazing things for the kids. I met her by way of System Blue, which is the educational arm of the Blue Devils Drum and Bugle Corps. I'm their director of education, in addition to being on the faculty here with Conn-Selmer. So this rekindling of the romance between Blue Devils and Conn-Selmer has been especially gratifying for me, because it's just such great people all coming together. It's just I can't even begin to express how exciting that is for me. So we've got Mesa, Arizona. Yes,
I know all these people.
Rob,
Christina, Danny.
This is terrific. We got to get last names in here next time too. So just for me, because that helps me kind of get a handle on stuff. Well, we got a couple more minutes, so I'm going to tap dance a little bit longer. There are no offers, no videos, no files, no slides, but there are attendees. And the whole point of this, though, is just to make this a discussion. And we have not divided questions up, the ones you've submitted. We're just going to read them and let people respond as they feel works. I'm going to ask everybody in the conference, or my colleagues here, that maybe a few times over the course of the evening, if you'll put your email addresses in the chat window, just so people can have access to us afterwards. The goal is to make it through all the questions that have been submitted, but of course, if we can't, we want to be able to offer the opportunity for you to contact with us directly. And obviously, the Google form makes it anonymous this way. So if you email us, I guess there has to be a little element of trust there that you feel comfortable enough to ask us things and reveal yourself. Now, of course, you could create one of those spam accounts that I've heard of so people can visit sites and they don't want anybody to know. I don't have any experience with that. I've just heard about it. So if that's your thing, there you go. All right, I guess it's my turn to put my email address in there. So do you guys all have a little blue type when you type in the chat window?
Yes.
I think I've got some sort of blue barrier to my eyes because it's really hard for me to read that print. It's not age, though. It's definitely not age. All right.
Away.
So we're going to, it's 5:59. We're going to, well, 6:59, depending on where you are. I'm going to get this thing started. So I'd like to have all the faculty introduce themselves. For those of you that I may not have met up to this point, I'm Frank Troyka. I was a band director for 31 years, all of them in Texas. I am not a native Texan. I heard about Texas bands as a freshman in college. My band director was Eddie Green, and many people know him as someone who's kind of changed a lot of the ways we think of bands, certainly me. So I came down to Texas, finished my degree, so I could learn how to do some of what was happening down here. That was back a long time ago. I graduated high school in 1977. Yeah, I said that. So that's who I am. I'm also on the faculty at Southern Methodist University, Oklahoma State University, and Sam Houston State, adjunct faculty in all those. And I get to supervise student teachers. So I get to work with young people a lot, and that's really my passion, helping people avoid the mistakes I made when I was getting started. So Jarrett, why don't you introduce yourself, would you?
Sure. My name is Jarrett Lipman. I'm the band director at Claudia Taylor Lady Bird Johnson High School in San Antonio. I have been a band director there since 2008 when the school opened. I am, during the summer months when drum corps is happening, I'm on the brass staff with the Boston Crusaders. I was at the Cadets for a long time before that, and just really excited to have the opportunity to present with Conn-Selmer this summer. This is the first summer that I've been a part of this, and excited to be with you tonight.
In addition to being the coordinator for the new teacher track for the Conn-Selmer Institute, Erin Cole is a wonderful band director for many years in Georgia. Erin, why don't you fill in the gaps for us, would you?
Sure, yeah. So now I'm a senior educational consultant for Conn-Selmer and an educational clinician for Hal Leonard's, specifically the Essential Elements Method book. But I was the band director at Tatt Middle School in Cobb County, Georgia for 22 years and just moved from there 2 years ago. I'm now living in Scottsdale, Arizona, loving the desert. So yeah, and just we're talking mostly to college students. And I just want to say this one thing, you know, I'm a daughter of a high school band director, and my whole time growing up, that's what I wanted to be, was a high school band director. And I truly thought that was my path. And when I got done student teaching, and I student taught in an awesome high school, Walton High School in Marietta, the only job opening at the time was at a middle school, and it was at Tatt. And I thought in those days, well, I'll take this job, you know, and keep looking for a high school job, maybe the next year. And I absolutely fell in love with teaching middle school students. And I never anticipated that happening. So the moral of that story is you never know.
That is awesome. Myra Rhoden joins us. Now, Myra and I have known each other for a while, but we've really never gotten to know each other. So I'm excited to hear her thoughts tonight and her response to some of these questions. Myra?
Hi. Well, thanks for having me here. And Erin, I have a similar story to the you never know what kind of job you're going to have. I am originally from Tuskegee, and I taught for 3 years in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, middle school. I was the one that never wanted to teach beginners and never wanted to teach middle school because I didn't want people to not know how to play because of me. So I wanted to avoid that beginning band thing. Well, my first job was teaching all beginners all day long, all sixth grade school in Tuscaloosa. So that's what I did for 3 years. And then I moved to my hometown in Tuskegee and taught at Booker T. Washington High School in Tuskegee for 4 years. Then I moved to Montgomery and taught at Lanier High School there before moving to Fayetteville, Georgia. So I've been in Fayetteville for 17 years at Fayette County High School. And going back to the beginner band thing, for my first 10 years at Fayette, beginning band in 5th grade was taught by the high school teachers in the county. So here we go again. I'm thinking I've avoided that beginner band thing. I had to teach it for 10 years every day at the elementary school across the street before coming, first thing in the morning, before coming over to the high school to finish up the day and the evening activities. So you never know. In addition to that, this is my my first summer here at CSI, so I'm excited for that. And then my second summer at Vandercook doing a class for them for their MECA program.
We got some experience in the room here. This is awesome. So I just posted in the chat window the link to the Google form where you can submit questions anonymously. If somebody still wants to submit something there, of course you can put something in the chat window if you like, but please flag it as a question with the little red dot so we know to prioritize that. So I'm going to dive right in here. The first question we have is, what strategies have you as educators used to widen that spark in students to make them hungry for more? I'm naturally curious and like to seek unknown things, especially in music. But how do you all pass that same energy off to the students? What a great question. Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'll start.
Great.
I'll take a stab at this one. I think the key is getting to know your students and your community and knowing what's going to light that spark, right? It may not be the same. It's not a one size fits all is what I'm saying, from one area of the district to the next, right? So you got to figure out what's going to get them excited, even from the very beginning stages of recruitment. You know, what's going to light their fire about even joining your program.
I'm going to share something I've observed in Jarrett as I've watched him teach and present. Jarrett exudes enthusiasm, and when you're excited about something, there's this inherent implication that there must be a reason why. It must be important. And I think our students mirror our level of energy and commitment. And if we get excited about things, they tend to get excited about things. But I think if you want to look at a real finite, measurable strategy for sparking kids' enthusiasm, you create success for them. And if you can figure out a way to create some sort of short-term measurable success, something they're going to think is successful, then I think you start to hook them. And that means you have to create opportunities for them to fail. I mean, there's no challenge without the inherent possibility of failure. So when you create the chance to fail, but then you equip them with the tools and the information to succeed, they start to learn about themselves, and we prepare them to take on challenges outside of our influence as well. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, one thing you can do is also make sure you understand your kids, just like Erin was saying, and maybe relate the new things that you want them to get excited about to what they already know. So start from what they know and then move to the unknown. And that way it's relatable to them.
Absolutely. And that lessens that inherent fear that sometimes happens, you know, especially with kids that are transitioning from one campus to the next. Mm-hmm. They need to find something familiar to make them feel safe. You know, I'm not a big fan of substituting things like pizza parties and those kinds of things as the primary motivator. I like those as rewards for having achieved. So I think of that when you want to create those kinds of things, you do that to accompany the success, and you make that a social reward to show your appreciation. Those things are a gesture of appreciation for their hard work and achievement, not as a substitute for their genuine effort, in my opinion. Next question. This is a great one, very practical. How can music educators set themselves up for financial success? Anybody want to tackle that one? I'll go. Okay. I counsel young teachers on this all the time. And as someone who was I won't say starving college student, but I certainly was living day to day much of the time, hoping that kid would show up with his money for his private lesson so I could put gas in my car and get to the next obligation, that kind of thing. When you get that first paycheck, if you've never had a regular income, like a real full-time job, you're going to feel rich because that money's coming in regularly. And the fact is, the more money you make, the more money you're going to spend. So two things. My advice is, when you get that first job, live your first year like you're still a starving college student. And if you've never been a starving college student, become one. Don't get an extravagant apartment. Don't go buy a brand new car. Get things, live a meager existence till you can see where your money's going and you can save some. Now, I won't say the antithesis to that, but certainly by contrast, once you start having that job, you want to start to build a home for yourself too. So rather than buying furniture to get you by, like a folding card table, and maybe you need that in the short term, but start buying some things that you're going to build a home around, where you can start to create an identity for yourself and a place that you can come back to every day that you feel is where you belong. That's psychologically a good thing. You don't have to go out to IKEA and do a whole house full of stuff right away, but start building your home. The other thing is, find a financial advisor who can help you put away a retirement account from the very beginning, in addition to whatever your state or school district already will take out of your paycheck every month. So most school districts, if not all school systems, states take money out to put into an account for you. And in some places you might be able to live off that very comfortably. Other places you may want that second account. But if you start putting money away in your 20s regularly into a retirement account that's specifically not a 401k, but a 503b, I believe it is. Is that what it's called? 503. Anyway, there's a tax ID number for it. But there are certain privileges that are available to teachers because we're government employees that allow us extra benefits over the long haul. So there's no reason why you can't live a comfortable life while you're teaching and a very comfortable life once you retire. Any other thoughts on that from my colleagues here?
Yeah, and as much as you can, we had one of our student teachers from a number of years ago. His name was Bobby Hoyt, and he ended up he split his time between band directing and then doing a financial blog, because his kind of his clickbait was that he had paid off his student loans aggressively within just a handful of years of graduating from college. And he talked about the process in which he went through to do that, up into including living with his parents at home, trying to stay home longer than maybe was comfortable. Every time someone was getting going on an expensive trip, or if it was a choice between eating out and continuing. So you echo what Frank said about just trying to live within your means, or even smaller than that early on. Tackling the debts that you have from before as aggressively as possible will down the road enable you to be able to save. And similarly, if you can save for retirement and get it going now, you want to try to do that as soon as possible. The very first paycheck, meet with the financial advisor and start putting it away in the 403b. My family's advice was always 10% of your annual salary if you needed a starting point. And if you could do more, do more. And then once it's there, don't touch it. And that's what every great financial advisor will tell you is now I've been doing it for 12 years and I see how much it's grown, and it continues to grow, and it's exciting to see it grow. But that temptation to tap it sometimes when you need it, that's really what you want to try to avoid, in my opinion.
One other thing to consider is really finding out where you're spending your money after a first couple of months. Like, just sit down with your statements and see, are you really spending $300 on fast food and coffee every month? Once you really know where your money is going, and then you can start to adjust your budget based off of that, and make sure you're keeping tabs of where everything is going in addition to that.
That's great advice, Myra. I use a program. I'm not endorsing the program. It's telling you what I use. It's called Quicken. I can set up my checking accounts and credit cards in there. And so every time any transaction happens to the bank, I can download that to Quicken so I can see exactly where I'm spending my money. And I was shocked to find out how much Starbucks gets from me, because there's literally a Starbucks directly across the street from me. Our doors are aligned, which initially I thought, this is awesome. And now I think this is temptation. I'm being tested all the time. So I'm grateful to COVID for shutting them down for a while. So here is next question. What are great ways, besides being amazing at your instrument, to build your idea of musical interpretation? I feel in my lessons I struggle to make musical decisions. It sounds even more stressful trying to do that for a whole band. That's a great question. Who's going to tackle that one?
I can go in.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'd let everybody. I think that, the hardest part, and we always talk to the students about this, is having a sound in your ear or having a role model or an idea in your ear of what you tend to gravitate to. And if you aren't sure, what musical decision to make, let's say you're working on a piece of music where there are lots of reference recordings out there. If you're working on Shanties by Robert Sheldon, at any given moment, you could go on to YouTube and you could listen to about 15 or 20 different versions of high school and middle school bands that are playing through Shanties, up into including finding the version that was recorded by the professional band. And sometimes studying others' interpretations of the way that things have been done, whether it's a grade 3 piece of music or grade 6, it may end up inspiring you. And for me, I go back to Stephen Meade was on euphonium in college, my main inspiration, and then Dr. Bowman, and wanting to go learn from him, David Worden. I could name 3 different euphonium players that I would regularly listen to for ideas because I felt like I was flat. And sometimes my interpretation became their interpretation. So I would listen to what they did, and I would try to mimic that or duplicate that until eventually that started to become second nature. But even now, as I'm teaching my own students on euphonium or in band, I still feel like it's a lot of what would Stephen Meade do, and I know that there's a lot of band directors that go, what would Mr. Green do? What would Mr. Bennett do? And that's now, what would Mr. Troyka do? That's what would Mr. Lipman do? Eventually, our interpretations become a lot like our mentors. And so, finding that role model that makes your heart pitter patter or really, resonates with you emotionally is sometimes the best place to start to being able to craft your own musical sound or ideas.
And there's nothing wrong about copying. There's nothing that's debasing about it or that you're conceding any sort of lack of musicianship. I mean, you learned how to walk because you watched and copied somebody. So let's not worry about that. But one of the things you can do, I like to teach a lot by counterexample. And when I work with middle schoolers trying to help them do march interpretation, little kids don't understand the subtleties of note length and emphasis and inflection. So rather than try to get them to make this note a little bit longer, this note a little bit more pronounced, I say play everything short, everything staccato. I don't care if it's a whole note, a half note, whatever it is, and no dynamics. And then what I'll go back is after they're playing everything bopped or short, then I'll say, now every time you see a dotted quarter note, play that longer. And so then they start to do that. I start to introduce the elements of style so that the pendulum swings completely one direction, and then I let it swing gradually back the other. So if you want to find your musical voice, then stop trying to interpret. Take it all out. Remove every dynamic, every articulation, every nuance, and play it as sterile as you possibly can, which will drive you nuts. And then start to layer back in your ideas. Devoid of what it says on the paper. Just layer your own ideas in and see what sounds good to you. So forgive the use of the term, but just flatten the curve. Get rid of it all. And then start to introduce things on your own. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think also watching other people teach, like Jarrett was talking about having mentors and listening to examples, but actually going to watch those mentors teach their own bands or invite those people in to work on that piece with your band. They're going to have a fresh approach to the piece, and you're going to learn a lot from that. And I want to say hey to India. I see you in the chat, India.
She is. Hey, India. Now, Erin and I no longer are in a position to hire people to teach for us, but Myra, you are, right?
Yes.
And Jarrett, you are, correct? So just a question, do either of you have any vacancies either in your school or in your school district? Not that I'm trying to advocate, but I'm just asking, are there vacancies in music positions in your teaching environments right now? Myra?
We had a couple, but they've all been recently filled.
Good news. What about you, Jarrett?
Yeah.
We actually just hired somebody for a position at Claudia Taylor yesterday, and we're interviewing for one at a middle school that's a head, and then one at a middle school that's an assistant. We filled about 5 other band positions in the district, and I think we're going to have a couple that open. So there's jobs.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is because the next question is, how do you think COVID-19 will affect those looking for jobs this next year? And you two are in the thick of that. So have you seen anything, have you heard anything from above that might indicate to you that there would be a hiring freeze, or there might be positions eliminated, or any such thing? And keep in mind, those of you in the chat room right now, or not chat room, in the room itself, Jarrett teaches in Texas, and Myra, you are in
Georgia.
So we're in a position, and I say this yesterday, one of the conversations we were having was that a lot of the musicians that are coming out of Texas State University this year are close with the band directors that teach in the district because of the proximity. And they've been talking about the difficulty that they've been having getting into positions and getting into jobs. And they're not negative, but there is a little bit of anxiety because the classes before them felt like they had locked down positions. I know at least in Texas, they're not using the term hiring freeze, but a lot of the school districts are just now starting to open up and post positions that they normally would have been in April or May. So I say that not to provide false hope, but to provide an insight that at least in my perspective, talking to some of the Austin and the Dallas schools and even down in the Valley, that you're going to start to see more jobs that are popping up now that people are starting to make the decisions. Retirements are big. A lot of people are choosing to retire because there's concerns about coming back with COVID. And so I think that that's probably going to push some jobs open. But I mean, I can speak in Northeast that we've had a 3 to 4 week delay with our human resources just in getting people hired, let alone getting jobs posted. So don't lose faith. Your timeline is going to be different than the timeline of some of the people in prior years.
One of the things I think you can do, though, to advocate for yourself is, if you've just graduated from college, just finished your student teaching, what have you done to adapt your ambitions to this environment? What were the things that happened that you did to supplement the obvious vacancies or lapses in your experience? Conn-Selmer Institute's a great thing to put on your resume as evidence of things you've done to fill in the gaps. So look for things that are going to set you apart as a candidate as well, because I think that's a question people are going to ask, especially if you're an entry-level teacher. How did you overcome the shutdown in terms of what you would have learned there? How did you compensate for that? And those answers are out there. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Well, I see in the chat, that's Travis Downs, who used to teach with me at TAP.
Yeah.
4 middle school positions open in Gwinnett. Gwinnett's a massive county north of Atlanta, so that's a great place. And then Greg Denson in Cobb County, where I used to teach, there's a middle school orchestra position. So and I would search those. Go ahead, Myra.
Yeah, there are a couple of more positions in Georgia open as well in various places. So one of the positions that was actually open this year was my feeder. And from the time over the years that I've been here, I don't really know if I saw a difference in the number of applications, because the number has been pretty big even before COVID. So, we will have 80 or 90 people, for any one band position in our county, apply. But that's always been the case. That hasn't been just now. So it may seem as if it may be a COVID thing, but I'm not sure if that really affected it, at least not in the area where I am. I think it's just always been hard. But there are places to go. You just might have to travel to get to them. So you just have to keep your mind open to traveling.
This next question I'm going to throw toward Jarrett, because I saw his 2 sessions today where he was working on this very topic. How can I improve my ear training? I took ear training 1 through 4, passed, but wait, did I ask that one already? No, I just remember reading it. I highlighted it. I took ear training 1 through 4 and passed, but I just did what I had to do to pass. I practiced every day, but just repeated exercise, and it doesn't seem to do anything. And having a friend play hard exercises for me either. While I was pretty much he says, it just does nothing for me. So how do we improve ear training? Jarrett, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
We talk with our own students about the idea that the very word training is the key for all of it. And that for some of us, some things come easier. I always tell the story that I took the AP Music Theory exam in high school, and I got a 5 on the oral skills portion and a 2 on the written skills portion. And it averaged out to a 4, but I say it because I got stronger at it in college, but you may find that some things are going to come more naturally to you in life than others. And the way I got better at theory was I continued to double down and study theory. I studied it with different people. I went online and I looked at different resources. But for your ear training stuff, practicing the basics and constantly checking against a reference, I think is the biggest. Recording yourself. I can't tell you how many times I record myself singing major scales up and back or minor scales and the things that we have the students do, and singing along with somebody. I mean, I think that it can only get better if you train it to, but if you feel like you're beating a dead horse or you're not making it work, then you want to try something different. And so, maybe that's a point where you without knowing the specifics of what you've tried or what anybody has tried, sitting down with somebody that may be more comfortable with it, whether it's a choir director or a band person that teaches AP theory, and just asking them for some guidance. Say, this is what I've tried, this is how I've practiced. Getting some coaching on it can definitely make a difference if you feel like you've hit a dead end. Because I know that there were students in other sections of ear training when I was at Rutgers that did not have the professors that I did, that really struggled with it. And I felt like my professors were pretty remarkable in that. But also, that's a piece of for you, if you're, you had different experiences, finding somebody that can help guide you with that. Check your audio, Frank. Got it?
Dang it.
You're on.
Yeah, we
You're
can
good.
hear
I
you.
am back.
Yeah.
Dang. All right, let's try that again. Thank you, Jarrett. Okay, I'm looking for the website I just pulled up. This is teoria.com, Teoria. And I'd like to, this is a great place to go for music theory training, for ear training. In fact, when I was getting ready for working on my master's degree, I went to this website to brush up on all of those things. So if I click here on the ear training thing here, I can look at intervals from a random note. And then there are things you can do. You can set it up, games, tests, exercises you can do that will help develop ear training. You can see here they have tutorials, exercises, reference articles. So it starts from the absolute most fundamental, never, ever have I ever, to very experienced and very complex jazz harmonies. So that's teoria.com. I'll type that in the chat window right now. There we go. Right. Next question I have here is, I feel confident in most cases in my skills as a teacher and musician. However, I often need help. That applies to me. How about you guys? Yeah, I often need help. And now that children need other voices saying the same thing in various ways. How do I go about getting invitations to go visit? How do I go about getting others to come to me without feeling as if I'm begging? That's an interesting question. And I'll kick that off by saying, I'm very lucky. I never felt like I was begging anybody to come and listen to my kids. People always seem very open to do that. And I'm talking about at the very early stages. Maybe something you can do is, instead of just asking someone to come out and as a clinician and maybe, you pay them a modest amount, whatever, create an event. I remember there was early in my career, we have something in Texas called No Pass, No Play. And I had a lot of kids in my non-varsity band way back in the 80s that did not pass classes. And I could not take the band to contests successfully. But what I could do is I could create a similar event on campus. So I brought in 3 of my most esteemed colleagues to be the judges. And I had them play their concert program, had them do the sight reading portion, just as if they were going to the real thing. And we got ratings, and I told them right at the onset, don't do us any favors. This is not about flowers and candies. I want a real reading on this. So I brought them in. And I know some of you know these names. Bob Floyd was one of my judges. Lynn Jackson was one of my judges. Brian Gibbs, who's now at Sam Houston State, was one of our judges. So I brought in some pretty big heavies. But what I'm getting at here is invite them to an event that's built around them, because then you're not begging anymore. You've built it around them. Or look for an area of expertise that you want them specifically to focus on with you. Any thoughts from the rest of you on that?
Yeah, there was part of the question that said getting an invitation to come in. Don't wait for an invitation. Call, email, do something. Introduce yourself. Don't be afraid to introduce yourself and say, I would love to come to your band room and spend the day with you. If that's okay, what day is available? And just do it. That's a great way to learn, and a great way to find mentors, a great way to get to know people in our profession, and a great way to know what to do and how to interact with kids. Just be a fly on the wall. You can do that with marching band rehearsals. You can do that with a class, take a day off from work and go to it doesn't even have to be far. It can be the program right down the street. And if you are not comfortable with having, like Frank said, some of the heavies coming into your program, start with people that people that you went to college with. Ask them to come and work with your flute section or things like that. It's not begging. You can always say, I'll come and work your clarinets if you'll come and work my flutes. If you don't have money to do that, that's fine. Use the barter system, or just tell them up front, we really don't have a budget, but I would love for you to come and spend an hour because I want to be a better teacher for my students.
Myra, so many times I've had somebody come in where I said, hey, look, we are at the end of our budget. Can I buy you dinner? Or we go out and we just hang, and it's fun. We do these things for each other. That's our profession. Erin, were you going to say something just then?
Myra just said we must be on the same wavelength, because you have to be proactive. You can't wait for an invite. You just gotta, and I still do this. We're all still learning. I still sit in people's rehearsals every chance I get.
Yes.
So you have to be proactive in that process. But she mentioned even just going right down the street or whatever. I think about this too. I've watched so many different rehearsals, and you learn so much, and sometimes you even learn what not to do. Sometimes you'll observe a rehearsal, you're like, not sure that's the way I would go about that. But it's always a learning process. But I think you'd be surprised at how many people are out there just to help and to collaborate. And, we all want to make our bands better. So people are willing to help.
If I can mention one thing that I like to do is, if you have an honor band situation, all state, something like that, go sit in the rehearsals. Yeah. The start of the rehearsal is what I like to see, because I like to see how the clinicians engage with the students, how they get them on the same page, how they get them to watch their conducting, how they introduce the pieces to the students from the beginning. And you can learn a lot from there, and that doesn't cost you a dime. Just go right in and just sit.
Excellent.
Let me jump in on this one too, because this was really, for me coming to Texas, I was pretty intimidated when I came down, and it's like in New Jersey, there were so many great Texas programs, and I didn't really know the teachers behind them, but I knew the programs. And so as I was learning about these directors, and I just remember feeling really overwhelmed and really unsure, or like, I don't want to approach that person. And sometimes, and I even find this in myself, you see these directors and they're at finals at BOA, or they're at a rehearsal and they're at UIL contests, and they don't always look approachable. And that's all the way down into every director. You're in your moment at your marching contest where you're worrying about your students and you're worrying about that. And so sometimes, the worst time to build the connection is when you're seeing them. And maybe that's the only time that you're making the connection, is when you see them. And so I think that, I go back to, in the third year, and this was really transformative for me, I went to observe for 3 days at Spring High School. Gabe Musella was the band director there. And Gabe had been on staff at Crossman when I was a drum major. And I remember being really intimidated by Gabe. And so when I emailed and he wrote back and came in, the 3 days I spent there watching him and Terry Reisinger do the bands, there was so much that we changed and I learned and we adopted at Johnson. And I felt like I left there with so much of not only an idea of how to teach, but a sound that was in my ear, listening to his ensembles and you know, what he was trying to achieve there. And so I say it all the time, you're going to find that 99% of band directors are open doors. And if they're not, there may be a situation that prevents it, you know, the day or the timing or something. But, you know, never be afraid to send an email and go spend a couple days, because most of the time the directors absolutely love having you there. It's such an honor and it's so cool. And they'll probably show off for you. You'll get the best teaching. The kids will show off for you if they know that there's somebody that's going to be there. And so I just really encourage you to reach out and make the trip. If it means, you know, getting in a car and driving. I mean, we've had students that have driven in from Georgia and from Alabama and Florida to come observe for a couple days, and they make a road trip out of it. And, you know, it's definitely, it will be transformative for you if you can go watch some of those programs that you've always dreamed of spending time with.
Many talk about how important it is that you become really good at your instrument in order to be a great musician. I was on my way as a good trumpet player, but I developed a lip injury, and after a few years had to switch to euphonium. I'm behind where I feel like I should be now. How can students who are fabulous musicians, who aren't fabulous musicians, compensate?
I think if you're worried about the fact that you're not able to demonstrate as well on your instrument because of a switch, you know, being able to demonstrate something on your horn and being a fabulous musician are not necessarily the same thing. Being a fabulous musician, I think, is something that can take a lifetime. There are kids that are great players. They make the all-state band, but in terms of their musical experiences, they have a lot that they can learn and that they can grow. And so, you know, your musicianship is not dictated necessarily by how well you play the instrument. Now, that said, if for your own, you know, belief, you want to get stronger at your horn, then practice your horn as much as possible. But the beauty of it is you're going to come out of it with that experience, understanding what a trumpet player feels like having to move to euphonium, understanding sometimes what a woodwind player that maybe started on flute and maybe was miscast and moves over to saxophone, or maybe it's a brass player that was miscast and goes to color guard. I mean, there are hundreds of kids that I've taught that have switched instruments, and I think your perspective on being able to switch and knowing what that's like is more valuable as a teacher than the perception of whether or not, you know, you're worried about being a great musician, because you're your own worst critic. And so, you know, get great on your instrument, but it's not something that I think is going to stand in your way in the long term of being able to affect the lives of kids in you know, music.
Tell your story. It's a great one. You experienced a significant setback that you overcame to continue to be a teacher. That's a great story for your kids to hear, because that shows perseverance, endurance, and willing not to give up, looking for ways to press forward. As I mentioned in a previous session, I had a terrible embouchure as a clarinet player, and it wasn't until I was in college that I had somebody who really paid strict attention to what I was doing, and I had to go through an embouchure change at 19 years old. And so that's part of my story. So that motivated me to be a meticulous teacher of beginners, so that I don't set my kids up for the kind of setback I experienced. So again, I think in some ways you've been given a blessing, because you've got a perspective that isn't available to someone who found it easy. So good for you. If I cannot find a job to start my career, what do you recommend doing?
Volunteering.
But Myra, to that, how do you make a living as a volunteer?
Well, that's a great question. You can't. You know, I mean, but if you want to get experience and you can't get a job, you know, sometimes you have to just ask if you can help. And you never know, you'll have someone who can recommend you for something if they hear about something.
Well, I think you're right on track there, because you've got to stay connected to the profession. If you decide you're going to get a job at Macy's to pay the bills, that makes sense. But if you're taking a year away from teaching or the music profession while you're just surviving, then you're becoming a year more removed, and it's going to make you less attractive. So you've got to stay connected in some way to the profession, teach private lessons, go volunteer to do section rehearsals, go observe, but document what you do during that time. But you know what? If you have to drive for Lyft or Uber for a while, there are worse things you could do to earn a living. I'm not advocating that, but you got to do what you got to do to survive, obviously. But the important thing is, don't let yourself stray too far from music so that you stay current and you stay relevant. That's important.
Someone put in the chat, substitute teach.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
I tell you, anytime we find out there's a musician on the sub list, that person always gets the call.
Yep.
So not
And
only just, go ahead.
You're also gonna get really good at classroom management. I'm just saying, when you're going in to substitute teach and you got a different class you're having to manage every day, it'll be a breeze once you actually get your real job.
Yeah.
I kind of wish Franklin Willis were with us right now, because this next question is right up his alley. He says, how do you navigate difficult conversations with culturally responsive teaching? Wow, that's a really good question. Does anybody want to start the ball rolling on that one? That's what I was afraid of. Difficult conversations generally require a third party. Anytime you feel like you're going to enter into a conversation that may become sensitive, delicate, then it's time to get someone else involved so that there is accountability all the way around for whatever might be disclosed. Now, I'm going to recommend that you seek out Franklin Willis. He's an expert on this very subject. I will tell you that when I am faced with a situation where it's outside the scope of my experience or my direct observation, I always bring people in. So share this responsibility with people who have some more expertise at it. And anytime you are faced with a situation that makes you uncomfortable or you think is sensitive, whether it's culturally responsive teaching, gender issues, abuse, you must immediately bring it to the attention of a supervisor or someone in a position of authority over you, so that there's accountability, so that you're always making sure that you're abiding by whatever regulations and processes and protocols that are in place. Anybody want to tag on to that? I wish my expertise were further along that line. I could have easily just ignored the question, but I didn't want to do that. I must concede my ignorance on that, I'm afraid. So, any recommendations for staying sane while balancing teaching and administrative tasks as the only music teacher in a K-9 school? Get a dog. No. Yeah, how do you stay sane when you're the teacher teaching K-9? I haven't been in that specific situation.
Yeah, I was going to ask if any of us had experience with that.
I will. Go ahead, Jarrett.
I was going to say, try to find other teachers that are in the same situation, and that's not meant to be a cop out as much as it's. I know in Texas we have lots of the 1A and 2A high schools where it's a one-horse town, and in some cases it's K-12. And I went to observe in Arcadia, Ohio, when I was in college, and it was a one school town, and the band director's name was Jeff Breitigam. He was a wonderful teacher, and I just spent 2 days out there because I wanted to see what it was like for someone to teach band and elementary and general music all the way up. And Jeff had such an open door, and the benefit that he talked about was the seniors had been with him since kindergarten, and so there were so many amazing things that he got from that. But with that said, I just remember he was leaning a lot on parents to help with things, and because the town was smaller, he was able to use parents to help with administrative tasks, and if it could be delegated, he did that. But I would be seeking out, if there's not a Facebook support group, there needs to be, and maybe that's something that you could create for people that have the exact same question that you do, because I guarantee you're not alone in that, and talking to someone else that's there would be great.
You might also considering, instead of trying to do a different preparation for every single class. For instance, let's say within that K-9 structure, you've got 4 elementary music classes you're going to teach today, and maybe a beginning band class. Rather than teaching 4 unique elementary music classes, have an overarching plan that you adapt appropriately for each level. So I'm going to teach this, but then you're going to adapt the delivery for different levels. And that could be a sing-along thing, a music history thing. It could be a call and response thing. It could be watching a video or something that has a lesson, a relevant lesson. There are some wonderful things that you can do. Find if you go on YouTube, there are great educational tools. I don't know if any of you in the room here have seen the, I can't remember the name of it, but it's an old Disney thing that explains, it talks about music and explains Pythagorean tuning, and it's with Donald Duck. It's just awesome. So that doesn't, I'm not saying Donald Duck is a solution. That's sort of a temporary fix, but I think you have to look for ways to consolidate your efforts. And just a few other things too, and this is where Matthew Arau is a wonderful resource for this as well. You've got to decide when your day is going to end sometimes, because this job can be 24 hours if you let it. And you need to build in time where you say, I'm going to set this aside, and you're going to just be social, you're going to be alone, whatever it is where you find your space, where you find your mental health. You look for ways to build that in, just like you would another class. You're going to build in time for yourself where you're going to put this aside. Create to-do lists so that you can see measurable evidence of what you've done and what you need to do. And then whenever you need to put something off to another time, do yourself a favor and do your best not to beat yourself up over that. But task lists and building dedicated time for recreation, for meals, for breaks. Truth be told, when I was teaching high school, I built time in my day, usually right before or right after lunch, where I would close the door, lights off, windows blocked, and I would take a power nap. I'm the kind of person that a 10-minute power nap and I am good to go. Other people, that knocks them out for the rest of the day, not me. If I even just drift away for a moment, I seem to come back energized. So I sneaked away for a bit, and that's just what I did. Any other thoughts from the rest of my colleagues here?
And having hobbies, something completely different from band directing. And I learned that, I said that yesterday, Frank, in the new teacher track skull session. I learned that a little bit too late, but I think it keeps you balanced.
There was a question here that's a pretty broad one, and I want to acknowledge it. To be honest, I chuckled a little bit when I read it, because I thought just what a monumental topic this would be. How do you teach marching band drill? Well, Jarrett, in 25 words or less.
You blow me up for this one. 25 words or less to teach marching band drill. I said we were.
Well, he didn't say the question wasn't 25 words or less. That was my limitation I imposed on you. Okay. I will read the question verbatim. It is, how do you teach marching band drill? There you go.
Thank you. That's the part, the qualifier. I think if you're in the situation where you did college marching band, you did high school marching band, you did drum corps, that seems like it's second nature. If you were in a situation where maybe you didn't have that experience, the very first thing that I would do is I would try to develop a relationship with someone in your area and or a contact, whether it's you reach out to one of us when this is over and you get set up with someone that can consistently mentor you through the process, because there's no explanation I can give you in a 5-minute, 2-minute window that's going to help you. But there are so many people out there that love talking about teaching drill. It's like, I love talking about how to get a band to be in tune or how to be more musical. There are people where their passion is how to be effective. Step one, get kids out on field. Step two, child at a time, going through that, and we'll talk about that with you, and they'll do it for free. It's something that they love to talk about. So I think that would be, again, not trying to pass the buck, but I'm big on trying to surround yourself with people that can help you, whether or not they're paid clinicians and or just people that you reach out to when you need help. And you're going to find a lot of people are very generous with their time, and they don't expect anything in return. They're just excited to be able to help you and offer. So, reaching out to somebody that can be a strong, presence or mentor on that, would be the most important thing I think you can do if you're not comfortable teaching drill.
And a few other resources. This is not meant to be a shameless plug, but for the next 2 days, we've got a marching band workshop happening for CSI. Now, I don't know if they're going to address specifically how to teach drill, but you'll certainly be connected with people who are in the thick of that all the time. You could even check out systemblue.org. I do some stuff for band directors on those very subjects, on rehearsal technique and those kinds of things, because there's obviously a need for that. And System Blue being connected mostly to the marching band world, I provide that. So I'm, reach out to us and we'll be happy to share our thoughts with you. But yes, that is a little bit broader subject. Interesting question here. Why is it important as a band director? Let me back up. Jarrett, what are your piano skills like? Okay. Myra, how about yours?
So.
Erin?
I can get through a hymn.
Huh? Erin?
Yeah, I can play a mean Linus and Lucy. That's
I can
about
play
it.
Chopsticks. Ding, 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 ding. There I am, okay. The question was, why is it important as a band director to become highly proficient piano player? I missed that boat. I don't think it necessarily is. Being a great piano player certainly can help. I mean, it's a great musicianship tool. Jarrett?
I think if you're going to teach general music, you need to be a great piano player. I don't think you have to necessarily to be a band teacher, although I can see it being very helpful, demonstrating, theory, demonstrating tuning and balancing. But I also think that, compared to 10 or 15 years ago when there was no tonal harmony and tonal energy, and there was no harmony director and all the different things that you could reach out to lean and teach, chord structure, I feel like that might have been more important than some of what's available today. So it's not to take away from being a great piano player, but I think in terms of the list of things if they had spent more time at Mason Gross teaching me how to manage a budget and going through business classes and talking about marketing and less classes on piano proficiency, I would have been better my first 3 years. That's a personal opinion. And so I'm all about piano. I get it. But if you could take a business class this summer, boy, that would just be a peach.
Oh, for sure. We've gotten to a point now where I've got some new questions that were entered through Google Forms, but I don't want to ignore Eric's question from over a half hour ago. He says, what are ways that students in college can become active advocates for music education in their state and nationally? I think you start with your state resources first, your state associations. Go to their websites and see if there are advocacy tools there or recommendations they have for getting involved. Certainly TMEA has those. If you go to tmea.org, you'll see a resource tab with lots of things. Erin, it looked like you might have some suggestions there.
Well, the Collegiate NAFME chapters, I think it's important to get involved in that if you have one of those in your area.
Excellent. And boy, you want to talk about resources. NAFME is the clearinghouse.
They're all over it. Yeah.
They are all over it. Absolutely. In fact, when you go to those websites, it can be overwhelming. I'm going to tell you, I'll go click on those things sometimes and go like, where do I begin? Well, what you do, you begin with one thing. Just click on anything and see where it leads you. Here is one that I am really interested to hear a response to. As a female music educator, how can I be an empowering leader without being seen as strict or bossy?
I want to use the B word is what that person did.
I did not paraphrase it was bossy, but that's what I read too, okay?
Yeah. Myra, you want to take the lead?
I guess I've never really paid
attention.
Wait,
I have to interrupt.
Yeah.
You see how beautifully Erin empowered Myra's leadership at that moment? Beautiful example.
Yeah, because I don't know if I was going to touch it. So, I guess you just have to not worry about what other people think about you. If everything that you're doing, it has good intentions, and that you are, teaching the way you've been taught, the way that you may have some ladies that you can go and observe to see how they handle different situations. The first time I saw a female band director, a lady band director, was in college. My college marching band director at the University of Alabama was a lady. And that's, I didn't even know that existed. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so I kind of looked to her to see how she handled situations, because all of those terms came out about her too. But one thing that I noticed was that she kept doing what she was doing, and she was great at it, and she was gonna be a leader, and she was gonna be a strong leader and not worry about what other people thought. So, sometimes you have to self-reflect too and make sure you're not being that ugly word. But it's okay to be empowered and to be in charge. And if other people have a problem with it, then that's not your problem.
Totally. Yeah, you can't worry about that. And the kids know you care about them. I mean, that's the bottom line, is you have to be genuine and they have to know you care about them.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I wouldn't presume to speak from the perspective of a woman, but I will say that when you have a rationale driving what you're doing and you explain the why, if people understand the why behind things, they tend to buy into it more because they connect with the reason. There's a wonderful TED talk that's, it's got to be about 11 years old now, by Simon Sinek. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yeah.
So if you go to TED.com, do a search on Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K.
Mm-hmm.
People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And it's a fascinating thing, that discussion about how the why is at the heart of everything that motivates us. Really, really fascinating. Another great question. How do you know when it's time to move on from a job?
Oh, wow.
Great question.
Well, Erin, I think, did you stay at the same school?
Yes. And I only taught one place. I was there for a very long time. And when I left, it was,
Yeah.
I'm not the one.
How did you know it was time to move on? What was it?
Because I got married. And my husband has a job in Arizona. So, that's what decided that. But, I'm not going to lie to you. It was the hardest thing I ever did. I mean, that was my place, So I think somebody that, has left a job to go to another place should speak on.
Mm-hmm. Jarrett?
My only advice, because I've been in the same place too, but I talk a lot. We usually have between 2 and 3 student teachers a year, and some of them we've always been able to get them into a job, which has been really cool. But sometimes they get into a job where maybe the relationship with the head director is not healthy, or it's a situation where the climate with the administration has not been healthy. And so we've just always used the advice that if they feel like they're being demoralized, or they find that they're losing their passion for the job because of something that's going on with the job, then we try to have a conversation to guide them to think about it. I mean, I think that there will always be the positives about it too, and seeing other opportunities, and when it's that, and maybe somebody else can speak on that. But I just know that if you ever find yourself in a situation where the job or the people that you're working with are causing you to doubt yourself, or you're feeling like you're being beaten down, that would be a reason that I would think would be worth exploring, looking for something else, because it is a job, but it's also a passion. You don't become a music teacher without having a passion for it, and make it through band director school without it. So, if you find that your passion is being pushed or tested, it might be worth a conversation.
We've got some phenomenal questions here that we're not going to get to. So I want to encourage everybody. We have time for one more, I believe. But I want to encourage everyone, please, to bring us your questions directly if you like. Could I ask all of us one more time, since that chat window is so far down, the scroll further down? Let's put our email addresses in there one more time, so we can got to look at the fine print here. Yeah, got it right. And feel free to reach out to us if we were not able to get to your specific question. There was one more here I want to go. This is an interesting question. I absolutely have to defer to my colleagues on this one. How do you balance dating and a romantic life while trying to have a successful program?
Erin, you just got married.
Go, Myra.
Well, I'm the one that's been with the same person since high school. So he knew what he was getting himself into. Wow. He's not a musician, and that probably was a good thing, because we have 2 separate career paths. And so,
See, that's interesting. He's not a musician,
no,
because so much of the time, the spouses are both band directors or both music teachers, so they have some empathy for each other.
Right.
So I think it's fascinating that you found that fit.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, he played viola for 2 years in middle school, so that's the extent of his musical training. But you know, I don't know if I can really answer that dating part because it's been 30 years, you know. So.
Jarrett, you want to offer an opinion?
Sure. I think, you know, what you want to try to remember is that because it's a passion, it goes on my last question, it can have a tendency to become all consuming. And you've got to put boundaries on your time, even though you may love it. People would say to me all the time, you know, what do you do for fun? And I'm going, well, you know, I'll worry about that in a couple of years. And I think it's just so important that you even if you have to carve it out, you have to write it out and go, you know, evenings are going to be my off time. Weekends are going to be my off time. You know, I know there's a lot of band directors in the state that have absolutely used the online dating service, and some of them, their only qualification is it's not a music person. And so you kind of have to figure out, do you want to be in a situation where you're with a musician, or do you want to be in a situation where you're not, and maybe that's your break time? So I just think it goes out with any hobby or anything else. There are so many examples in our profession of people that have had spouses and children, and then there are a lot of people that have remained single, and that's been the choice. And you know, you can find great examples of both, people with successful programs, people that are really happy on both ends of it. You know, but I think as with anything that you're going to do, you know, making the time is going to be, you know, on you to figure out how to balance that in.
But I think it's always, you kind of hit on it, real, Jarrett, beautifully, is that you find people out there that have a life similar to what you would like to have, that are married, that have families, and find out how that are successful teachers, and see how they did it. And I'll bet you anything they did exactly what Garrett just said. You've just got to make time for certain things, because you know the world is going to keep turning, whether or not we have a section rehearsal at this time or go to this contest, whatever, the world's still going to turn. So we've reached the end of our time. I want to thank you all so much for being a part of this event. This has been history making because we've never done it before. And I have been so enthused at the way this is all unfolded. Even though we have the occasional glitches, I think everybody met in the middle on this and accommodated each other. And it's just been so invigorating for me. Any final thoughts from the rest of my colleagues in the room?
Thanks for coming and spending time with us tonight.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out. I mean, we're here to help you guys. We've all been there.
Yes, absolutely. Same here.
And if you do reach out to us and you don't get a response, understand, please, that we're probably working our way through emails. We'll want to get to you. You're never pestering us if you follow up because we didn't respond. Please don't interpret a lack of response as disinterest or apathy. Sometimes it's just a matter of organization and time. So hang with us, okay? It's been wonderful, everybody. Please have a great summer, and hope to see some of you at the Marching Band Workshop. Bye-bye.